Yeah.
Okay. So, welcome to our first live stream. So we are soliciting questions, and I think we have one question. At least I saw one question. Which one? What is that? Ed?
No, that was just
No, there was one from Karen Porter.
yeah. She's asking how to join the session.
Oh yeah.
But we can start with.
Well, she has a question here though, right?
She,
What is her question again?
Here it is.
Oh, here it is.
She was asking how to join.
Oh no. She was asking about what will Greg. There's something about the airplane. Oh yeah. Okay. Why don't you read the question?
What will Greg commit to do to get the FAA to change the concentration of jets that now fly over Palo Altos at low altitudes?
Yeah. So, Karen, thank you for submitting that question. Let me just first say that since I've moved to Palo Alto, I've noticed that the airplane noise has gone a lot worse. I mean, it's pretty terrible, and I think this was an overall effort to kind of speed up air travel, but I think it has a negative consequence on Palo Alto. And I think the challenge that we have is uh, the FAA is a federal issue and not a local issue. So it makes it very difficult for us to have direct power. So what we can do though is we can get lobbyists, we can look at legal options, but we don't have any direct control or legislative control over this issue because it's essentially driven at the federal level by the president. So it's not something that we have direct control over, but it's something that we should follow. We have hired lobbyists to deal with this, and they're trying to make some headway. But in my opinion, not enough because we still have this issue. So I think what we can commit to do is use the powers that we have, which is lobbying and perhaps looking at legal options to drive some sort of resolution.
So I have a question. So
Sure.
what projects or items are you excited to approve or coming up to council that you would like to discuss?
Sure. So in a few weeks, we have the council retreat. What day is it again? It's like February 4th or something?
Yeah, or third.
Or 3rd or something. Anyways, in a few weeks, we have the council retreat, which is going to talk about the city priorities. And one of the priorities that we haven't talked about or hasn't been on the agenda or the priority list in a while is high-speed broadband. And it's if you look at compared to other cities or even other countries, Palo Alto used to have one of the fastest high-speed internets around. And it's not that ours got slower, but it's just ours hasn't gone as fast, and it's not as reliable or as cheap as some other places. And so I think really encouraging high-speed internet is something that we all use is really, really important. So I want to put broadband. Broadband, I think, was high-speed broadband was something that was on the agenda maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It's kind of fallen off because there was hope that Google Fiber or some other provider would come in and do it, but it's still been very, very slow. So I think we should look at ways to how to promote this and uh, make more competition or utilize the city's fiber ring um, to get better services for our residents.
Okay, so looking for a question.
It's kind of weird. I can't see the question, so let me see here. Some messenger.
So please comment below with any questions that you have.
So do people just comment, or can people actually
They can comment.
Can actually talk on it? I mean, can actually hear people, or is it just
No, it's just a comment.
Just comments.
It'll
Okay.
come up here.
Okay. So is it different than what we do right now for other? No. Okay.
Let's see.
So we'll just wait for other questions then.
Yeah.
So just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, just write the comments and I'll answer the question. I think you wrote that there, right? Yeah, you did.
Greg, did you want to talk about what you hope happens for the undergrounding? Oh, well, actually, there's a question.
Okay, Sean asked, did the governor shutdown affect any of our Palo Alto facility or changes will apply to Palo Alto? So good question, Sean. I don't think so. As far as I know, there hasn't been any impact, thankfully, so far. Yeah, I mean, I think mainly because it's mainly at the federal level. There's nothing at the local level, and we don't get too much funding from the federal level. So there's not, right now, there's almost no impact. Sorry, what question were you asking, Raj?
Yeah, I was asking, did you want to talk about your priorities for the rail
Oh, rail.
in the upcoming year?
Yeah, I think it's a project of the century, right? It's something that's going to be there for multiple generations, right? And it's probably one of the biggest infrastructure projects in our history. And so I think doing it right is really important. The possibilities range from doing nothing, just keeping exactly the way it is, and then having the impact of the arms going down more often, to tunneling it all through the whole city, right? Those are kind of the extremes. I think tunneling, people are quoting something on the order of like $1 billion per mile, so that's like $4 billion. And doing nothing, of course, is free, but then you have the traffic impacts. And then there's everything in between, like just closing some streets or doing like bike tunnels or moving some streets. So there's a lot of other options as well. And I think really figuring out what is the right solution is important, because like one solution like tunneling would be somewhat ideal in that, the rail is completely below ground, but it's so incredibly expensive and there's no, easy way to pay for it. And moving the roads have issues because that could mean eminent domain for houses around those intersections. So that's not an easy option either. There's a viaduct option, but that's also very unpopular because people worry about privacy issues. They worry about the noise issues of an elevated train. So every option has pros and cons, and it's not there's no easy answer, right? The thing that I think is kind of interesting is I saw Elon Musk boring company recently bored a I think 1.5-mile tunnel down in LA, down in the city, and the cost for tunneling wasn't $1 billion a mile; it was $10 million a mile. So I think that's actually gives me a lot of hope that maybe technology will allow us to solve some of these hard problems. Because if tunneling suddenly, instead of being, say, $1 billion a mile, was now, let's call it $20 million a mile, right? So let's say we have a fancier tunnel than what he built, like double the cost. If it was $20 million a mile, could we do it for $100 million or $200 million? I think that's an exciting opportunity. but I don't know how much of his tunnel is just a prototype tunnel and how much of it is a tunnel that we could actually use, because I think the tunnels that he's building right now are more ones that are for diameter of a car, so they're much, much smaller, versus like for a Caltrain, they're very, very tall trains. So I think those tunnels have to be much bigger. And when I spoke with the boring company, they mentioned that bigger the diameter of the tunnel, more expensive it is. So I think probably Elon Musk pilot tunnel that he did in LA would probably cost a lot more because it's a much bigger diameter. But still, I think it's interesting to kind of think about how these kind of new technologies might be able to benefit the city. But this is a discussion that we're going to be having in terms of how to do the grade separations. Personally, I think we have to do something. I don't think the option of just leaving it the way it is makes sense because of traffic impacts. Right now traffic's already pretty bad. If you don't do grade separations, traffic's get even worse. So I think we must do something, especially as electrification happens and a lot more trains go up and down the corridor.
Okay. If you received a $1 million grant to use for the city in any way you wanted, what would you do with it and why?
Well, I would be ecstatic because I think one thing that the city doesn't do as much of is try to get grants. I think we're not as good at it as we could be. So a lot of other communities are very, very aggressive in getting grants. So back to the question of was there a do you get impact? I mean, I guess it's positive and negative. We didn't have much of an impact from the federal shutdown because we don't get much grants from the federal. That's kind of a shame we don't. We don't get more grants from the federal level. We don't get much grants from the state or county. But it would be good if we could, right? Because I think it's important to get our fair share. What I understand about Palo Alto finances is that we're kind of a net tax exporter. So we will actually export taxes out. We're a fairly wealthy community, so I guess that's not unexpected. But still, it would be good to see some of that money flowing back to Palo Alto. So how do we make our roads better? How do we make our schools better? How do we make the community here better as well? We're the second busiest Caltrain stop, and so you would think that we would get some more help from other government organizations to help with this grade separation, but it doesn't seem likely. I think we should definitely try to do that, but it's not a likely scenario right now.
So just a reminder to comment with your questions so Greg can answer them.
I hope people could hear us,
Yeah.
Oh, there's supposed to be a red moon today, right?
Or
super moon?
I think so.
The moon's supposed to be closer.
Yeah.
Actually, I heard that Burlingame, was it Burlingame or one of the cities up north, they got their grade separation almost all paid for. They paid just like $20 million, and versus all like 90% of it was paid through other grants that they got.
Oh, wow.
So it would be nice to get that $1 million. Although we need more than $1 million, but I mean, there are some cities that are really really good at getting grants.
And that's from the federal government?
I don't know where they got. I think they got it from San Mateo.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't think we're on top of Trump's favorite list, so California. So I think on the federal level, I don't think that they have a lot of great love for California, but I could be wrong about that. I know that just for the electrification of Caltrain, the federal government didn't want to help pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I plus a few other council members from other cities visited Lane Chow at the Department of Transportation to lobby for it. But Yeah, for most part, and they actually did fund it, which was good. But for most part, I think Trump's going to try to stick it to us. Because I don't think California was one of the states that supported him. Yeah, I'm not sure how many people get on Facebook Live,
Yeah.
versus like if you did something on Twitter.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll look for some more questions. Okay, well, here's a general question. Do you feel there's waste in the city budget? And if so, cite specific examples.
Yeah. I think there's waste in every budget, actually. Not just the city of Palo Alto. Although the city of Palo Alto budget, I look at very, very closely right now. But unfortunately, there's waste in every budget, and it's one person's waste is another person's important project. And so I think it's what it is prioritization. Really trying to understand what's important, because the list of things that we want to do is always longer than the money we have. And so I think where the council can add value is prioritizing, right? Saying what's important, what's not important, and then spending money on things that add the most value to the city, and not spending money on things that add less value. And so I think that's I think the main role for the council, and that's something that I hope we will do this coming year. In previous years, we really haven't prioritized our spending. And for instance, I'd love to have like my own private jet, but how high is it on the list of priorities, right? Probably not very high. And so I think that's the same thing with the city, is that we have to prioritize better. And I think that's something that's hard because it's very political, right? It's some people want this, some people want that, and so nothing really gets prioritized because it's such a difficult thing to do, because somebody's always going to be upset. But I think as councils, we are representatives of our constituents, and it's our jobs to, argue about what is important, what's not important, and to really come up with that priority list, so that we can figure out what makes sense to spend money on and what makes sense not to spend money on. I think largely because we don't prioritize. Everything's important, right? We have to spend money on everything, and so what that means is that we just go for higher taxes, because it's a less politically charged thing to do than to just like prioritize the projects of what we want to spend money on, and have a kind of a certain short list. Because I think what we strive to do, what the city tries to do in general, is try to make everyone happy. and so it never says no on a project. It rarely says no, and I think that's hard because right now we're in kind of relatively good fiscal times. I think we had like record revenue last year, but we have a stock market that's kind of had a bit of a crash. We have this trade war, we have this government shutdown, and the good times will come to end, unfortunately. I hope it doesn't, right? But we're in the longest bull run since, I think, 1968. I think we're only 2 or 3 months off from having the longest bull run ever. And I, for one, would love to see this continue on forever, but it doesn't, right? The good times do roll to an end. And at some point in time, we have to make decisions about what's important, what's not important, even though it's politically hard to do, right? It's really hard to say what's important, what's not important. But I think that's something we have to do. We have to be kind of like the adults in the room and figure out like what's really, really important and what's like nice to have. And so I think that's something that now that we have a smaller council, maybe it's a little bit easier for us to do. But at least in the couple of years I've been on council, there's been strong resistance to prioritize. I know there's some other colleagues who on the council who would like to prioritize, but there's been in general a strong resistance to prioritize. But I think we should do it, and we might actually have enough support this time to prioritize and figure out where do we want to spend money, where is it most effective, and that way we are utilizing the resources of the community the best versus just saying yes to everything and just figuring that we can also increase the revenue to make up for it. Because I think what we should do, we owe it to our community to, before we raise taxes again, we owe the community the diligence that we tried everything else, that we try to make sure that we're not wasting money, that we did everything else we can to not raise taxes. Because I think it's important that for us as representatives of the community, for us to treat the money like our own money, right? I mean, we would, before we spend money ourselves, we have our own priority list, right? We say, well, maybe we want to, allocate money for our kids' college fund, right? Maybe that's more important than buying a new sports car, right? So we, in our personal life, we all kind of do that. But in the city, we don't right now. And it's kind of a shame. The sports car and the kids' education has the same priority, but it's not true, right? Some things are much more important than others. And I think we've been allowed to do that because the economy's been so good. Private tax has been going up. We've been able to kind of fund everything we want to fund. But I think we do need to make choices. And I think prioritization and making choices is actually really important and important function of the government to figure out what to spend money on, what not to spend money on.
Okay, and how would you propose we gain new sources of revenue other than raising taxes?
Yeah, so there are so many different revenue sources. If you look at some other cities where they didn't have the luxury of, having their own utilities and raising rates there, or having, private taxes that are really high, right? There's a lot of creative ways. One of the ways we just talked about, which is grants, right? If we could get more grants, if we could apply for more of them, I think that's one thing. We're an important economic center for the country. Actually, a lot of the startups come here. A lot of venture capital is here. We're near an important university. So I think grants is something which we should do a much better job, because I see a lot of other cities, they seem to get grants left and right, and we don't. And I'm never quite sure why. I think we maybe don't have a focus there. So I think that's one clear way. I think, to me, raising fees and raising taxes should be last resort. I think there's other creative things that could be done. I know, for instance, like the city of San Diego, the way they raise money is they have naming rights, or like the city of San Francisco, right? So they sold off the naming rights of AT&T Park. I think they sold it to Oracle, and I think it was like $300-400 million. I mean, that's not bad, right? I mean, that's some real money there. I know San Diego does the same thing, but they do it even on a smaller scale. They'll sell off like naming rights for a bench, right? So you could buy a bench, like $500, and get your name on the bench, right, for the year or things like that. Or you see, like on an interstate, people say sponsor this, sponsor
Adopt a highway.
adopt a highway, right? That's right. So there's things like that. And I think when the economy is bad, I think these kind of things pop up again. But then when the economy becomes good, this stuff kind of drops off. But I think there's a lot of other revenue sources other than just keep raising utility rates and the fees and the taxes. I know that we raised, I think, some of our utility fees by like 10, 11%, which is several times the rate of inflation. And some people pull out to that stuff's no big deal, right? What's 10% extra on the utility bill is no big deal. But I know that for some people it's actually a lot, right? I know that some retired people who are fixed income, it's a lot, right? I know that actually one of my daughter's friends' parents, they are, one of them lost their job and the other was only working part-time, and the utility rates is actually a lot for them. So not everyone in the city is rich. I mean, a lot of parents who live here are on the edge. They have to pay a big mortgage, have to donate to the schools, they have to do this and that. And so there's not a lot of extra money to go around. So it's, I think we have to be careful about that because some people are barely here in the city. And by raising the taxes and the fees, it drives some people out.
So just a reminder to comment below with questions. I think we'll wrap it up in 5 or so minutes. How do the rates that the city of Palo Alto charge for utilities compare with PG&E?
That's a good question. So one thing you have to remember that the city actually owns our own utilities. And so we invested, a bunch of capital into our own utilities. So it's kind of like the question of how does your housing cost compare as a homeowner versus a renter? So we're like a little bit more like a homeowner in that we own our own utilities, and other cities are like renters because they don't own their own utilities, right? PG&E is a separate entity. And so as a homeowner, there's a bigger upfront capital cost because you have to build all the infrastructure. And in return, you get a lower rate, right? You just have maybe the maintenance of that property, right, as a cost. Versus PG&E is a separate entity, and you're more like a renter. So like other cities that aren't PG&E, you're more like a renter. So the rates should be higher. At least you would expect the rates to be a lot higher. Otherwise, why be an owner, right? So if living in a house cost you monthly the same as a renter as an owner versus an owner, then why own, right? You might as well not have that capital cost. Unfortunately, right now, actually, our rates are roughly the same, very similar, right? They're not that different. So that's kind of like the big question. Like we're like a homeowner, we have all this capital, but yet we have rates that are very similar to PG&E as a renter. And so you think, what's the deal with that? Like why don't we have dramatically lower rates, right? I mean, it's like owning a house in Palo Alto but paying the same as if you were renting. Maybe you do that for the mortgage, but once you own it, right, the monthly cost should be lower, not higher. So that's the challenge. Now, the flip side, of course, is that we could do what we want, right? We could be more aggressive on green energy. We could be more aggressive on priorities in the city. But right now we're not seeing the full financial benefits of owning our own utilities. Now, the flip side, of course, is I think PG&E just went bankrupt. So, they had the firefighter, they had the fires, and there's like huge liability. So there's probably some benefit there as well. So maybe that is the financial benefit, is that we don't have to worry about the legal obligations of causing a lot of forest fires. So we have another question here, which is housing and transportation are, as they should be, the council's top priorities, but what are the other issues you plan to? Okay, so this question is saying, what are some other priorities we're planning to tackle in the city? So we'll find out in a few weeks. So I think the council is going to be talking about what the priorities are. One of the ones I think we should look at again this year is broadband, high-speed broadband. For a long time, it looked like maybe we get through Google Fiber, but it still has been very slow. I think having a really fast communications infrastructure, internet infrastructure, is really important. Having really good broadband, I think it can help create new services that we don't even know about, maybe like virtual reality or something like that we just don't know yet. So I think having fast, reliable internet, much faster than we have today, like a gigabit speed or higher, I think would be something that we should try to strive for. We've been talking about it for decades, and it hasn't happened. So how do we encourage that to happen? I think could be interesting. This was a priority a few years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, but maybe it should be one again. But I'm actually looking for feedback from the community. So if anyone has thoughts on what other priorities should be, please comment or let me know, because we are looking for feedback from the community, because we are representing the community. And so I think knowing what the community wants is important.
And so we'll take our final questions, and until then, if constituents want to meet with you, when can they come in for that?
Yeah, so we have office hours every Sunday from 11 to 1 p.m., including today. And so you're welcome to drop by. It's probably better to actually schedule it to make sure that there's time on the agenda. But otherwise, yeah, just let us know. We always want to hear from the community. And yeah, so and anytime you want to meet, just send me an email, like let us know on Facebook, Twitter, and we'll schedule time with you.
Okay, I think that's it. Right.
Okay, Raj, thank you for setting this up.
Okay.